Spoilers for Deltarune chapters 1 to 4 are in this video, you have been warned. In Deltarune chapters 3 to 4, we have gotten so much character development for Kris, Susie, and Ralsei. But Kris's relationship with the knight has proven to be confirmed. But there is an interesting relationship between Kris, Carol, and the knight. Carol seems to also be aware of the player, which is shown in red text towards the end of Noelle's house. Kris seems to be working with the knight, almost betraying Susie and Ralsei. We see Kris doing the least amount of damage in the knight fight, doing even less than Ralsei, unless Susie and Ralsei are both swooned. The knight also does not swoon Kris but decides to simply down him, and does not slash Kris at the end of the battle but decides to almost knight him. If you also hold your breath twice in the knight fight, Kris starts to smile, almost detecting that the player is struggling. Another moment similar to this happens in chapter 4. At the start of chapter 4, when you go on the first night chase, if you actually make it to the end of the corridor, Kris stands there while Susie begs Kris to attack. Kris clearly is using the little bit of power he has to stop you from attacking the knight. In Noelle's house in chapter 4, in the pacifist route, we see Kris talking to someone on the phone. Some people believe it's Gaster, but it is pretty obvious it is Carol. With Kris talking to the person asking for them to intervene before Susie finds the shelter code, Carol comes back almost instantaneously after this bit of dialogue. We don't know if Carol and the knight are working together, but it's pretty obvious Kris and Carol are working together, and so is Kris and the knight. But why are they all working together? We don't know who the knight is, but the knight is heavily implied to be a member of the Holiday family. On another note, Undyne seems to play an important role in the Deltarune story, with Kris slashing the van's tires at the end and Toriel calling the police. Kris's intention here was clearly to lure Undyne in, and with the shelter having 3 codes, one of them being a police badge, it is clear the police have something to do with Kris and the knight's motives. And Toriel seems to have an important connection with the shelter, with her religious dress having the Deltarune symbol on it. And the knight also desperately tried to capture Toriel, before Susie stopped her. But why would Kris be okay with his mom being captured? To answer this question, we need to understand the knight's motives. I've seen a lot of depictions of the knight just being depicted as pure evil, but I believe there is more to it than that. Clearly whatever is going on, Kris, Knight, and Carol are simply trying to work for what they feel is better. And it seems like Undyne is going to be sacrificed later in the plot, with the voice on the phone mentioning that a police sacrifice is going to happen next week. In Deltarune, death doesn't seem to be the end of a Lightner's life, with Jerson being revived in chapter 4. The shelter is depicted heavily as a dark world, with the typical dark world bubbles that come out of it at the end of chapter 3. At the end of chapter 4's dark world, we see how there is only one way to save the world, and it must be a horrible way to save the world based on Ralsei's gatekeeping and Susie's reaction. Maybe the knight, Kris, and Carol are also trying to save the world, but they are embracing the end of the prophecy and trying to fulfill it. But there could also be another scenario if Des was actually the knight instead. Maybe just the knight, Kris, and Carol were just trying to get Des back to reality. But the thing is, that wouldn't make any sense, because why would a police sacrifice have to do with it? We may never know all of their motives, but what we do know is they clearly have a bigger goal than to cause destruction and havoc. Maybe even Susie and Ralsei will join the knight's side, or vice versa, because there could be only one way of saving the world. And Susie's denial might just have to turn into acceptance. It's like, would you rather sacrifice one person to save a whole world, or cause the end of both? Still morally messed up, but I think it could be quite an interesting narrative, considering all of the build-up of the prophecy we got in chapter 4. In conclusion, Kris and the knight's relationship is confirmed, and their motives are more than destruction, and they have bigger goals in mind. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this type of content. And I'll see you in the next one.